Hey there, I'm Matt Christensen, and we're back with another TV6 Investigates Talks. I'm here with Heidi Connect, who's a member of our Investigates team, and today we're going to catch up on John Deere, what's happened over the last month, do a quick recap, figure out where we're at and what's going to come next. So,
What's the latest thing since we last checked in?
Okay, so the latest thing since we last checked in is we're getting a lot of statements now in reaction after the numbers have sort of hit people. And, we're hearing from the union and Representative Eric Sorensen, the city of Moline issued a statement. So let's take a quick look at one of those if we can. Yeah, here's the UAW statement, and it says, there's no need for Deere to kill good American jobs and outsource them to Mexico for cheap labor. It points out that CEO John May is going to make $26.8 million, and that the company spent $43.6 billion on stock buybacks and dividends over the last 2 decades. So, the UAW is saying, hey, there's plenty of money to go around, no need to lay these folks off. Eric Sorensen also issued a statement. This was in the last day or two, and he says the decision to lay off employees from Deere is a punch in the gut to my friends and neighbors here in the Quad Cities. He says, my heart goes out to everyone impacted by these layoffs, from the union members to the salaried people at headquarters, and that Deere has had a deep history in the state and brings a lot of pride, and he stands in solidarity with those who question their future. So, that's not... a lot of positivity there.
No. So where do we stand with the layoffs now?
Yeah, let's take a look at those numbers really quick. We had 922 total layoffs in the Quad Cities in just the past 4 weeks. And so those have hit production facilities and the headquarters. There have been 134 at Seating and Cylinder in Moline, 211 at Davenport Works, 279 at Harvester Works in East Moline, and 298 at the headquarters in Moline. So altogether, that's 922 folks. That doesn't count a couple more rounds of layoffs that occurred prior to these last 4 or 5 weeks. And that includes, I think, some more at Seating and Cylinder and some additional folks at Harvester Works that happened in September of last year. So, that pushes us up more than 1,000 total layoffs in the last year here in the Metro Quad Cities, and there have been plenty more outside too at Dubuque and the Des Moines area, Waterloo as well. So
Yeah, hundreds more. Yeah. So let's put that in perspective. What does that mean? How is this different?
Well, I mean, this is pretty deep. There are cyclical layoffs. Everybody knows that, who has lived in a Deere community, and that goes up and down as demand for tractors goes up and down. What's different this time is that you're seeing a lot of salaried employees get hit, and the cuts are fairly deep historically, and the optics of it are different this time because Deere's coming off a record year of profits, and so. What Deere's saying, look, is the demand for tractors is down 20%. We need to make these cuts in order to, stay viable as a business. But when you look at where these kind of compare to other historical layoffs, from 1980 to 1983, Deere laid off, I think, 40% of its hourly production workforce, and I think 15% of its salaried workforce. So, those are pretty deep cuts relative to what's going on now. Now, that was, of course, triggered the farm crisis, and, that was a whole different...
That wasn't just here,
a different era, but, these are pretty bad.
Yeah. So from the statements we got from Sorensen, he talks a lot about Deere's history, how people in the area feel about Deere, and how that might be a lot about why people are feeling so gut punched by this, like he said. So what are people saying about this that you've heard?
Yeah, I've been talking with Deere employees, and one family that I talked to, they went on camera earlier this week, talked a little bit about how this is going to hit them especially hard because the husband and the wife both got laid off on the same day from Davenport Works. Deere has given severances, there's unemployment, other benefits through the union that are part of the negotiated contract. And then Deere's providing like extended health insurance and things like that. So there's gonna be a softer landing for some of these folks, but all of those things run out eventually. And this family is really worried that that stuff will evaporate before they're called back. And the economics of that might bear true too. From economists I've talked to, they're not expecting a really quick rebound on this, and that Deere tends to try to get ahead of the curve. And so this is an indicator, actually, that that maybe Deere is thinking that this isn't going to be a quick turnaround too. That's according to the economists that I've spoken with.
Yeah, they seem to have really long-range plans, and when people think about job cuts, that's not really how we think. It seems to feel more immediate about it.
Yeah, and it's important to note too that there are global factors at play here, domestic factors at play here. This is not just a simple, portrait of what's happening here, because you've got domestic issues like input costs are really high. The things that farmers need to farm. Interest rates are really high, so it's hard to borrow money to buy a new piece of equipment. And then crop prices are lower, so they have less income coming in. You've got the war in Ukraine, which is interrupting a major grain producing area. All kinds of factors that are playing into this, but none of which are going to get solved like that. So, where do we go from here? Well, we'll continue to watch this. Moline has issued statements saying that it stands in partnership with its residents who have been let go, and that it's there to try to support them. I think you're going to see other groups coming forward, trying to help folks who've been laid off. There's just a lot of families, and I think folks are worried about what that trickle-down effect might look like too, when other businesses who supply things for Deere start to see their orders drop. What happens to their employees too. So these are all stories we're going to continue to follow, continue to watch, continue to investigate here at TV6. So you can always follow along by clicking on the TV6 Investigates tab on our website, and that'll take you to all the stories that Heidi and I and the team work on. And we'll also continue to update you each week on Thursdays with another TV6 Investigates Talks, where we go a little deeper into the issues that are important to you and the Quad Cities. So with that, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again later.